Hello, everybody. This is Noah Rosenblatt. I am from UrbanDigs, and you are here because we are going to discuss the rental markets. We're going to discuss capitalizing on opportunities. We're going to discuss planning for 2020 and beyond, how to set yourself up. There's a few things that we're looking at here. Obviously, we're going to touch on the state of the rental market, but more importantly, recovery planning for the rebound that is sure to come once we could start showings, capitalizing on any opportunities that are out there, knowing the services that can help us provide the elements that we need to provide for our landlords and our clients. How will we close new business in this new market? Everything discussed today is going to be about translating this experience into your business over the next 6 to 12 months, okay? So the goal of this panel is to give you guys actionable takeaways, high-level actionable takeaways. And with that, I bring a great panel with you. We got Gary Malin here, Chief Operating Officer of the Corcoan Group. We have Sarah Saltzburg, founder and CEO of Bohemia Realty. We have Eric Benaim, from CEO and founder of Modern Spaces. We have Brandon Keks, CEO of the Pensio Group. And we have Dylan Pichulik, CEO of XL Real Property Management. Thank you guys all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Gary, let's just before we go into setting ourselves up here, let's talk about what's going on in the market. I know this is a concession-driven market, so I'd like to start with some basic questions of asking price, trends, concessions, etc. Are rents falling? How does the fee versus the no-fee landscape look right now in Manhattan?
Look, if you look at any of the disruptive events that have happened in the city over the last decade or so, anytime the markets experience some sort of shock to its system, concessions in the rental market historically have led our way out of that condition. Whether it's free rent and or a combination of paying the broker fee, owners want to get their apartments rented. There's going to be a standoff, of course, between tenants and owners right now. I think a lot of tenants believe the market's dropped precipitously. They're asking for very substantial rent decreases, and they're not really finding that that's accurate at the moment. I think the big issue that all of us are contending with is that not one of us knows exactly what's going to happen on June 22nd. We can all think we know what's going to happen, and I'm using that as the date that we're going to open, assuming that phase 2 opens on time and so on and so forth. The reality is, I know our website is experiencing massive amounts of traffic, year-over-year gains. We've definitely gone past what we were a year ago and the depths over the last few weeks. So it would tell you that there's a lot of interest. When I speak to my agents, they tell me there's a lot of interest. But until we open up the city, until we see the true vacancy rate, because there are lots of apartments that are available that haven't hit the market. There's lots of people that are in market right now that are probably on a month-to-month lease that once they can get out, they're going to leave. So until we know the true sort of vacancy issue, that's going to have a very significant impact on pricing and concessions. And then the last thing, which is really important, is a lot of the jobs that historically would start in September or October are very likely not going to start in September or October. They might not start till 2021. So the normal summer surge that we all are accustomed to seeing has been disrupted because of the virus. The jobs are going to play an impact on it. So, I think we're going to need about a month or so into the real market to determine what pricing looks like, what concessions look like, and what sort of negotiability there is.
Right. And that month into the reopen, do you expect a temporary bounce and then kind of that'll fade after a while because of I guess this new normal of where this active season might start?
It's hard to say. Listen, July, August are historically very, very busy months for the rental market. So there are people whose leases that are coming to expiration that signed a year or two earlier. So those people might likely be looking to move. If the market sort of goes more tenant friendly, there'll be apartments that people couldn't have gotten before that they might want to get now. I've spoken with people who are in their current buildings that their owners have reached out to them and asked them if they wanted to live in a larger apartment for not much more than they currently were paying. So I don't think it's one size fits all. A lot of owners are in different circumstances. Some are going to hold very firm to pricing and they'd rather keep a vacancy than fill it. Others are in a different circumstance and they're going to mark to market as fast as possible. And I think that's the benefit of the rental market. You can make decisions pretty quickly.
Right. What about scenarios, month-to-month scenarios, where the renter might be out quarantined? I don't know. Maybe they're in Long Island or in the Hamptons, somewhere else. Are there any kind of general rent reductions that are happening in these kind of cases?
Listen, people have asked for rent reductions based upon a lot of different scenarios. Listen, you've signed a lease, you're obligated under the terms and conditions of your lease. The owner, whether you like it or not, has costs, has expenses, has staff, has insurance, has whatever else they may have, mortgages, et cetera. So, owners have been willing to work with people if they can prove true need. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when asked to give the documentation to prove true need, don't want to provide that documentation because the facts are they have the money in the bank and they'd
Right.
rather not give it to their owners. So owners are smart business people and they make smart business decisions. So in cases of true hardship, I'm sure they're working with tenants, but for those that are just asking because they feel like they should ask, or they moved out of the city in March and they're living in the Hamptons and they haven't been there for the last 3 months, that's not the owner's obligation. Even under normal circumstances, if you decided to take a 3-month vacation and travel the world, the owner's still entitled to his or her rent. So I think it's case by case, but people want honesty and being forthright with them about your circumstances.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Eric, I want to talk about these rental consumers a little bit. Everyone's talking about these guys wanting this, that, to deal with this kind of crisis. What do you see these consumers wanting, and where do you see them finding it? Any buildings, specific amenities, features, neighborhoods, etc.?
Yeah, so we're our core focus is Queens, Western Queens. We actually sent a survey to our client base about a month ago, asking them what they like, what they don't like about their living environment, and many of them came back saying they wanted space with outdoor space. A lot of them wanted bigger space. Some of them wanted smaller space. Surprisingly, we saw that 66% of the people who filled out our survey were renters. And when asked a question, if you're looking to buy, 62% said yes. So for me, that gives me a sense of positivity for the market coming out of this. With regards to what they're looking, we're seeing a lot of activity for people who want outdoor space, people who want just more room or more space altogether. And we're also seeing our walk-up business has been skyrocketing the last, 2 months. We've been seeing a lot of people, a lot of our agents. I ran into one of our agents on the street the other day. And she's like, I just did 3 walk-ups this week, and she's not really focusing on what she never really focused on walk-ups for years. And all of a sudden, she's been like a great walk-up renter. So we're seeing a lot of people who are maybe wanting to go to smaller buildings now also.
So they're considering things they otherwise wouldn't have considered. The sales market's kind of dead in terms of like the spread between bid and ask. The rental market doesn't seem like that's the case. I mean, are you seeing a slowdown, or is it the market active? It's a little harder to do deals, and there's negotiations on both sides, and it's minimal at the end of the day.
I mean, we're slow. I think probably almost everybody is slow. We're probably down on the rental side. We're probably down maybe around 90%. We probably did up until now what we would normally do in like a week or two. We did during the entire COVID time. So obviously the market is down. We're also kind of restricted as to showing. We bought a bunch for our company. We bought a bunch of the virtual cameras, and we were doing a lot of virtual tours, and we've actually done surprisingly virtual rental deals out of virtual tours without even meeting the client. I could see the market changing a little bit that way. I still think at the end of the day, you're going to need to have a broker and a client meet with each other. But yeah, business is down a little bit, but I do feel confident it's going to pick up.
Yeah, we're at zero level right here. We're at the bottom, so it could only kind of rebound. I guess we could hope for a nice retracement. Sarah, I want to switch over to you really quick over here. How do you use rental data as a catalyst to close more deals on either the tenant side or the landlord side? So when you're analyzing this data, how do you convince a landlord to pay your broker fee? And in other words, why should I be hired?
Well, right now is a very weird time. As we've all been saying, there's no real precedent for it. But it's interesting. In the past couple of weeks, we've had a bunch of accounts that were previously open or limited listing come to us and want to sign exclusives. And I think that's because for our firm, for rentals, we're really specifically focused above 96th Street, parts of Brooklyn, some parts of Queens, but we really focus in on that market. And we know a lot of the data in that market. It's really hard to get data for rentals because it's not recorded really anywhere. You know, if you have that data in your own proprietary database, it's not something that's shared. It's not like Acris with sales where you can go and look it up. So when we talk to our owners, it is usually pretty specific where we can say, okay, you have a property here. We have another property 5 buildings away, and here's what they're doing. And then we have another property 5 buildings away, and here's what they're doing. You guys are totally out of, you know, you're delusional with what you're, you know, we can sort of help get them in line. And I think that's sort of what's happening now. I am seeing some landlords say, we realize that we're going to need extra help right now to get this backlog of vacancies to market once everything opens up, and we want to prep for that. And so we have been talking to them a lot about how we can do that. And, you know, as Eric said, and you know, probably other people on this panel have noticed, we've had to really get creative in order to get these units leased. And a lot of virtual technology, you know, right before the shutdown that Monday, we sent out a bunch of agents and said, just take video tours of everything. We got 150 video tours in like 5 days. And I think one of the most interesting experiences that we had at our firm, we had an agent rented a unit who was taking care of both of his parents in California who were sick with COVID, rented to somebody else who was coming from the Midwest, never met, and did the deal completely virtually. So, you know, is that going to be the norm? Probably not, but it's kind of impressive that it can happen.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that also that in the rental world that the virtual deals are happening here and there. It's not the masses obviously, but it is helping in some cases. Sarah, could you speak? I know it's a question I wasn't going to ask you, but could you speak on concessions that you're seeing? I know Gary touched on this. Are you seeing 1 month, 2 months? Are there deals happening with no concessions?
It's interesting because as Gary said, it's really hard to make a projection of what's going to happen when the market opens up. Everybody's just sort of waiting. So, you know, nobody wants to give away too much without knowing, you know, okay, is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 3? It seems like we're kind of right around the corner from that. So let's just wait and hold. And we're doing enough business to sort of maintain and get by. I definitely have owners that are saying, look, we're not looking for an increase in rent from what we got last year, or a very minimal increase, but we're also not it's not a fire sale. We don't feel like we're in that position yet. And there's still a fair amount of activity. It's not like the sales market. People, I think, are really tired of looking at the same 4 walls. And so if their lease is up and they have an opportunity to move and they see some good pictures and they see a good video, and they're going to take that risk and do it, you know?
Yeah. And I have a feeling those concessions are the deal makers out there today, and those are the hardest things to track. So for anyone that's out there looking at median asking rents, expecting a 15-20% decline, because that's what, you know, maybe the sales market might do. You're just not going to see it. Brandon, I'm going to move over to you. Listen, we're going into this crazy unemployment spike. We're at the highest rate in decades. How could owners and how could tenants hedge against job loss and unrecoverable rental revenue?
Well, the critical thing, and what's obvious, is open lines of communications between management and tenants. I've been speaking with owners and property managers, not just in New York, but across the country over the past few months. And what I'm seeing is that some are doing a great job in opening up and talking about making concessions or providing relief programs and assistance, and others really mixing it up and either being inconsistent or unclear or overbearing about payment deadlines and pressure. So I think it's important to strike the right note with your tenants, because what you want to do is you want to keep them renting and keep them in their units and reduce turnover, but also maximize collections. And that's about trying to create that positive line of communication. But it also comes down to a lot of desperation. We're seeing different classes of product experience different levels of vacancy. So talking to someone who's maybe got like a Class C product, they might be seeing up to 20% vacancy, which is pretty scary. And, you know, all this ties into, you know, the issues that were existing pre-COVID about income and job instability. But we're also seeing some landlords do an amazing job in terms of offering certain concessions, delaying payments, working with tenants to keep them in their units, and pushing off without giving discounts, but providing some sort of release valve and saying, you know, we can sort of give you a month or two and then push this down and look to pick this up in months 3, 6 through 12. And I think those kinds of ideas are really creative and have been actually pretty effective. But we're also seeing a lot of landlords reach out to the services market looking for product. So looking for some sort of solution on the market that they can buy or implement. And to be honest, a lot of them suck and have been disappointed. We're getting a lot of feedback from property managers who have been dealing with a lot of big insurtech and different businesses and haven't really found the solution. And that's why we launched Pensio Tenants. So we guarantee or insure tenants against job loss. So if a tenant involuntarily loses their job because of COVID or any reason, we'll pay their rent. And we're not seeing enough competition is what I'm seeing in the services market. So I'm hoping that what COVID is going to do is going to spur a lot of creative businesses to start up to try and get focused in on what the actual issues are, not on the low-hanging fruit like deposits, but focusing, which is on stabilizing our cash flows, mitigating issues that create events of non-payment and rental income and by tenants. I thought it was really interesting, the comment that was made by Sarah talking about rental data in the market. You know, it's not properly collected and aggregated, so it's difficult to understand unless you're deep into the numbers and have access, really what are the underlying issues causing people to be late or not pay, which is what landlords need to overcome. And I think it's important also to look at the differentiation between what is a professional tenant, which is someone that's going to be a constant problem and like looking for concessions but aren't an issue, but real tenants that are experiencing job loss or other economic issues right now and are just looking for a little bit of support so they can stay in their unit, not be forced out, and continue renting and get back on track. And a lot of what we're looking at in terms of timeline for recovery is, you know, we're all racing towards a vaccine, and then that's hopefully going to stabilize the national and state economy and prevent the big second and third waves that we might be experiencing. So I think that there's some interesting services out there and businesses, but I don't think that they're marketing properly to a lot of landlords because we're seeing that they're not seeing it. But one other big thing that we're understanding and hearing too is from the lender community who are saying, you know, I've got guys with huge portfolios that are having issues service their debt because they're not meeting their NOI requirements from their rent. So you see a bunch of lenders that are now potentially becoming landlords, and that's a scary thing too. So that's going to be interesting to see over, you know, the next 6 to 12, what happens there.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, how long does that time frame take to play out? It's probably like, I mean, with the credit crisis, it took at least a year or so for it to play out. Do you expect a similar time frame?
That's the feedback we're getting, and especially when we're talking with lenders, because they don't want it. So they want to figure it out. And a lot of the loans out there are non-recourse. So it's just them, you know, absorbing a property, and, you know, they're not professional landlords. So they want to keep their clients paying, but they want to look to the market, you know, for solutions. Right. And, you know, this is interesting. When you look at what happened in the UK between 2002 and 2012, there was a huge emergence of renters insurance, which is a product that isn't established in the US, which we're now working in that space. And that's what we do in terms of guaranteeing and ensuring rental income for landlords and lenders. Right. But I'm not seeing enough competition.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Very interesting. Dylan, you know, Brendan was talking about the property manager concept here. Why is it more important today, more than ever, to have a property manager, and how do you sell your client on this kind of a service?
Good to see everyone. Yeah, I think that's a very important point. It's never been more critical to have a property manager on your side. With the amount of issues that we're having with tenants not paying rent and lease renewals, and just the general climate, you really need an expert on your side who knows how to steer you through these issues. As many of you know on this call, back in July 2019, all of the rent laws were changed. And it made it much more complicated for the landlord to do business here in New York. And there's a lot more intricacies to the law than there was, and a lot more exceptions. So you need an expert to help pilot through all these issues. Every day we're getting calls from owners who are in bad situations, whether their tenant's not paying rent or the tenant's not moving out. And trying to manage these kind of affairs on an amateur level, an amateur landlord kind of level, I think would be near impossible. If you don't follow the right procedures and, you know, do everything the correct way, it could really cost you a lot of money. And we're seeing the effects of that, you know, every day now. You know, oftentimes I get calls from, you know, landlords who are in a panic position and you ask them, where are you today? And you get a little bit of the history of what they've done to get themselves into that position. And they're like, well, what did I do wrong here? And you're like, well, to be honest, like I would have gone a completely different route on all of that. So without having a really solid knowledge of, the housing court system and real estate landscape in general, I would not try to manage my own property unless I was incredibly knowledgeable on these topics. It could cost you a fortune. Not knowing how to deal with problems as they come up also could cost you a lot of money. So even though things like property managers are additional line items, the amount of money that we can save you, especially if you don't necessarily know how to navigate on your own, is tremendous and well worth the expense, more so than at any other time. How do we get apartments? How do we get access? How do we get tenants out? What's the proper process to even litigate against a tenant now if you're going to go that route? Without having the knowledge, it's an impossible thing to navigate.
Yeah, especially in times like these. Gary, I want to circle back to you, Gary. I want to go into pipeline a little bit. What is new development rental product that's coming to market going to look like in the next few years, and how does that impact pricing?
I mean, listen, there's a formula that's pretty much used across the board in terms of unit sizes, unit mix. It obviously depends on your building envelope and obviously your neighborhood. We've worked on massive jobs like Jackson Park, and then we've worked on some very small boutique jobs and everything in between. It's all about, the quality of the materials that are using, the amenities that you can put into a building depending upon, the size and scale of your building, what's necessary, what's not necessary. Obviously, everyone wants and always had, and I'm sure now more than ever, outdoor space has always been, the most important amenity you could have. I think if you look at Jackson Park in particular, I think why it was so successful was, the amenity offering was tremendous, but the outdoor space was, hard to replicate anywhere else. And I think tenants are looking for that. Now, obviously now during the situation that we're in, every amenity in every building has been closed. So, it's very frustrating when you live in these highly amenitized buildings and you can't get access to them, but everyone understands for the health reasons that you can't. But it's, we're working on jobs in the Lower East Side. We're working on jobs in the, in the East 50s. And, obviously Brooklyn, Long Island City, Manhattan, all over the place. And I think it's smart design, good feel, good marketing, but how you sort of intermix the amenities depending on what your competition is always going to be key for you.
Is there a lot of product in the pipeline coming to market, or is that a limited pipeline?
There's a decent amount of pipeline for sure that's out there. Now, the question is, given everything that's transpired, what plans that were out there, how many of those are going to pull the trigger now? Are they going to wait? What's the absorption going to be? I mean, obviously on the condo side of the world, there's a lot of inventory out there, especially at the high end.
Right.
And the rental, listen, every rental project ultimately that gets built gets rented, right? So there's no rental buildings that are empty. So it's just a matter of the price, the incentives, what your competition is, effective marketing. But listen, New York City at its core is a renter-centric city. So renters are always out there. It's a short-term commitment. And that's why I always feel when you come out of sort of disruptive events like this one, the rental market's a lot easier to navigate than the sales market. You're dealing with large-scale owners who understand that this is a business, who make the right adjustments. Whereas in the sales market, opposite new development, you're dealing with individual owners who are all in different sets of circumstances financially and have expectations about what their property is worth versus what it was worth. But right. I think there's going to be great opportunity in the market, and I think there's going to be great interest in the market.
Yeah, and you just made me think, how many new development in the sales sector is going to convert to rental?
Listen, the hardest part about converting a condo into a rental is the properties weren't really meant to be rentals. So now you're talking oversized apartments, price per square foot doesn't work. So, the pen to paper numbers don't necessarily pan themselves out. But, if you don't have a choice, sometimes you'll rent a block and you'll try to sell another block. So I think everyone's going to be in different circumstances. Once again, leverage plays a huge key. There are certain owners that are not highly leveraged that could stay the course and stick with their plan, and others potentially could lose their assets or convert them because they don't really have a choice because the sales process might take too long for them, whereas maybe somebody else, it'll be a whole different circumstance.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Eric, coming back to you. Listen, so I'm an agent. I want to again hammer down why am I being hired? What do landlords want? What kind of services do landlords want? What are they looking for?
I mean, they need right now. I think we're using it as a hook. Is virtual tours basically, especially for the smaller landlords. The smaller landlords who probably never even did it. The bigger landlords like the Jackson Park, which Gary was mentioning, Tishman Spire, they're an institution. But the mom and pop landlords, I think when you sell them on the virtual tours, it's a big hook. So for us, that's been really helpful. And then other than that is just knowing that we can close a deal, not actually being there. We're kind of like talking to more landlords about installing things like Ring or Latch or a lot of these like, I guess, entry systems where you could just program a code and delete that code within like an hour or whatever, and just give access to one person coming in. Obviously, having a good management company is key now. Also, we have a project in Manhattan that they were self-managing, and 40% of their tenants went on a rent strike. And I'm trying to persuade them to get a professional management company. But
Right.
I mean, it's just various types of things like that.
Gotcha.
Could I chime in on this real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Dylan.
Look, this is one place that I think that everybody and all agents have a time to shine. Because look, and speaking on behalf of the landlord community, things that were more important to me in an agent a month ago have completely changed. And what's impressing landlords now is the agent's ability to get with the change and create a protocol for us to allow us to rent our apartments in the environment. And the more that you as an agent can empower yourself to do virtual tours, all these technologies that people kind of left to the side before, that's what it's impressing landlords today. And that will get you exclusives. Because before, look, there's, the definition of good agent has changed in a way. Now good agent to me means who's adapted technology, who's willing to roll up their sleeves, who's willing to, deal with the riots and the looting in this current environment and help me as a landlord get my properties rented. And that's where everybody has the opportunity to shine. What's the best way to make it easy for the landlords given the constraints? And we all know agents can't legally show, and there's some constraints that have been put on agents, but how do you overcome those? And how do you, not circumvent to the point you'll get in trouble, but what are the creative solutions you can implement to help us rent our properties? Because, as we spoke about earlier, vacancies are, they're starting to creep up, and I want to talk about that a little bit later in the program, but it's different skills are required. And the more you can make yourself stand out as somebody who rose to the occasion during this period, the stronger you're going to appear as an agent. I would implore everybody on this panel who is a broker to start figuring out how are we going to adapt to the times and help landlords get their properties rented quickly because they need the cash flow.
Eric, right back to you, and then we'll get to Sarah.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, landlords are seeing how agents and brokers are really working hard. Not that they never worked hard, but they're really working hard and also putting themselves at risk just to get their apartment rented. And it's not even once the showings will be lifted, which is on June 22nd, there's still risk at June 22nd, right? So when agents go and show and meet a client, everyone's going to have whatever regulations revenue is going to be releasing, 6 feet, wearing a mask, whatever it is. The agents are putting themselves at risk, and the landlords are now kind of like appreciating that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sarah, the question is impressing landlords and the expectation of the agent.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to say to Dylan and Eric's point, in the past, in my experience, non-payment by renters had always to do with lack of service or a perception of a lack of service. It didn't typically come from somebody saying, I just don't actually have any money, so I can't pay it. Usually came from a tenant being pissed off that they weren't getting a phone call back, or a buildup of feeling that they weren't being communicated with. And so what would happen sometimes is that our agents will get a call saying, I can't get in touch with the landlord, or the landlord will reach out to us and say, hey, you put in a tenant, they haven't paid rent in 3 months, what's going on? You get the agent to pick up the phone and call the client and figure out what's going on, work as sort of a buffer. And again, to Dylan's point, this is when you don't have a great management company sometimes to do that for you. And typically that can keep you out of an eviction proceeding, somebody going online, posting a terrible review for the landlord. So that has always been the case. Now, of course, we're dealing with a different set of circumstances where people are not paying in some cases because they actually cannot pay. The way that we have messaged our landlords is to over communicate. We always message to over communicate with your tenants. I've never heard of a tenant saying, geez, if I get one more landlord or one more phone call, one more call or email from my landlord, I'm going to be so annoyed. No, like they want to hear, they want to feel like they're being taken care of, that their needs are being taken care of. So the landlords that we've noticed that have done a pretty good job with keeping their rent coming in is the ones that have really taken the time to reach out and message and say, we're here for you, we're gonna work with you, and not the ones that have taken a hard line and said, my rent is due, you better pay it or else. Even though they may be thinking that,
Right. Yeah, I gotcha. Brandon, I'm going to tell you to keep quiet, Brandon. You're talking too much over there. I got to get to you. Listen, we all know we're in an uncertain market. There's a big cloud. We can't see ahead of us. People don't want that. What strategies are landlords using to prevent vacancies, both now and in the short term?
Well, frankly, I think they're not doing enough. I think what Sarah just touched on in the way of over communication is the critical first piece. And then it's, I think, bringing in other services, because I think there's some interesting programs emerging right now. But I'd be curious to know for everyone on the panel, do you see landlords using like Rhino or Jetty or other like deposit programs? And is that working as an incentive? Because for a landlord, that might be a lower cost way to try and attract tenants, saying I'm giving you this, than necessarily like a month or two rent concession. Because sometimes the optics of those programs can be very good to a tenant. So I'd be curious, like Eric, Dylan, everyone else, have you guys seen these?
We're pushing companies like Rhino or Guarantors. We work a lot with Guarantors. We're pushing those companies a lot now, especially because we think people, they're not sure if they're getting a paycheck or maybe their paycheck got cut. So either with security deposits or whatever, having people, a lot of times their credit is not good, they're not sure whatever. Landlords, and so with the Guarantors or insurance or companies like Rhino, I think the landlord could rest assured, and for the tenant, whatever it is they charge, I think they charge like $39 a month or whatever it is. It's a lot easier monthly payment than shelling out $2,000 or worrying about if you're going to have a job in 3 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a new company. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we saw a big uptick in landlords wanting to sign up with Rhino Guarantors Insurance starting in June of last year, because they wanted some extra assurance on some of the on the rent stabilized properties. And so we saw a big uptick there, and it's only gotten stronger.
There's a newer company that's come out within the past probably year or two called Obligo. And I think Obligo might be a good resource for potential tenants, because programs like insurance and guarantors, they guarantee the lease, whereas this company Obligo just guarantees the security deposit. So especially in a market like now where tenants don't have a lot of extra cash on the side, rather than paying and insurance and guarantors, these are all great programs, but as an incentive, a good company like I said, Obligo, you just pay them a percentage, I think maybe 5% a month of the security deposit, and they guarantee the entire deposit, which might help a lot of transactions occur, especially considering tenants don't have the amount of capital outlay they had before.
Right.
I would also say the guarantors who we do a lot of business with, they also have a very interesting program. I forget exactly the name of it. It's like TG Pay, I think they call it. But because you can't pay extra security and you can't pay rent up front, they have created a program that is legal, where they can act, for lack of a better way of describing it, as an intermediary, where there's a way for you to, in essence, prepay your rent or have extra security legally because of the program that they've set up. They vetted it with the Department of State and everything else. So it's really important for owners to understand that the world has changed, and it changed before this. And there's lots of great services, and there's lots of great ways of doing business, whether it's now signing leases electronically or taking wires or anything else. I think owners need to get, that have had very sort of what I consider antiquated policies, because they've worked, and they've used them, so I can't blame them. If it's worked, why change it? But the world has changed. But more importantly than the world has changed, your tenant base has changed, and the way they want to work with you has changed. So it's very important as an owner to meet the needs of the clientele, because you want to have the deepest client pool humanly possible. And one thing we do at Corcoran is make sure that we are investigating all the definite opportunities for our owners to, expand their tenant base, whether it's through social market meeting, whether it's through working with the guarantors or anything else. I think you have to expand your horizons. And I hope that a lot of the changes that were made now that have enabled business to be done differently and quicker stay long term, versus some owners, I think, when they want to go back to their old ways of doing business I think that's a mistake.
Eric, did you want to throw something in there?
No, I mean, we've used that program too, the TP, GPay. It's good for like foreign national students or a lot of people who can't really pay a lot of rent up front, basically.
Gotcha. Okay, Dylan, I want to get back to Dylan. You were just about to touch on this with your obligo. I think that was what it is. What could agents do to help protect landlords on collection and bridging gaps between tenant and landlord issues? Is that one of your recommendations?
Well, that is something that we definitely use. But I do want to say on this point, and it's very important that everybody understands this, which is on bridging the gap with collections. And a lot of people say, fine, I'm going to go to, and I hear this a lot, if my tenant doesn't pay rent, don't worry, I'm going to sue him on August 20th. And if there's one takeaway from this you guys get from me, I really want to stress that now more than any other time, it's important that landlords are flexible with our tenants and we make deals. As a landlord, knowing how housing court works, I get very nervous when cases go to court. The housing court system is very tenant-sided. It was before. As I spoke about earlier, June 2019, we had new legislation. The legislation, the official name was the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019. You'll notice a key word was missing there, the word landlord. So this whole legislation was designed to protect the tenant. Courts were already very tenant-sided in the first place. And as far as bridging the gap, one thing I want to stress is we've got to make deals. We've got to be reasonable. And I know that it can be infuriating for owners. Probably my favorite / least favorite phone call I had was yesterday, where a tenant tells me he's no longer going to pay me rent because he blew all of our rent money on a beach house in Bora Bora for the next 6 months because and he needs a hardship consideration. Like, come on, dude, you're telling me that you're in Bora Bora right now. I don't know how you got there or how you're there. Quarantine. The landlord to discount your $30,000 rent because you blew it on a beach house? I mean, it's crazy. However, the only problem with it is I still want to make a deal with this tenant. And we really want to be as strict as we can and make sure our collections are high. But we also want to make sure we make deals and we don't leave everything to court. Let's say court opens on August 20th. I don't think you're actually going to be in court until at least October, because there's going to be a flood of cases there, and many of us, many of us work at different levels of the market. Though portions having a tremendous amount of problem, don't leave it to the courts to make decisions, because it takes forever. People sometimes think housing court is like traffic court, and you both go there and the judge says, well, what happened? And he rules on one side and everybody walks away. That's not what happens in housing court. You could literally be trying a case. And I had a case where the tenant paid my first month rent and didn't get a payment I didn't get one payment after the first month rent. And it took us a year to finally get her out. And we didn't even follow through the full court process. If you're depending on the court to enforce rent or to get them out of your apartment, you could be wrapped up in court for 1.5 to 2 years at this point.
Wow.
So don't be afraid to make deals. As far as concessions, yes, it's going to be hard to track this data because we as landlords are fighting to keep our tenants in. And probably the biggest challenge that we're having right now isn't necessarily with collections. For the most part, they've been down maybe 5 or 10%, although Excel is a much higher in landlord than most, so we're a little more insulated. But if we've got to make deals and give a month free or give a 20% discount for a few months, we're going to do it because we want to hedge our risk of vacancy and what's going to happen. And I would say even outside of the vaccine, probably the biggest marker we're looking at as a landlord right now is what's going to happen with schools in the fall. Because every time we reach out for a lease renewal, do you want to renew the lease? We're getting the same pushback. I don't want to pay the full rent right now because I'm in the Hamptons or I'm in New Jersey or I'm wherever or Bora Bora. I don't want to pay the full rent. I'm not using the place. Number two, I don't want to sign a year lease renewal because if school doesn't go back in September, we're not coming back to the city, especially now. I live on West 11th Street and we had a carjacking on our street yesterday. which is unheard of. And people are scared. They don't want to sign longer term leases. So for the most part, we're doing everything just to keep the apartment occupied. Instead of doing year lease, I was always a very big stickler about keeping to that spring, summer leasing schedule, because that's when you get the bulk of activity. But this is the first time where I'd say, you know what, let's extend the lease 3-4 months, get it out of the summer so we have more clarity, and hopefully we'll be able to do a longer term renewal then.
Right.
People don't want to, they're not necessarily planning to leave, they just don't know what to do, so you can't get them to sign a year lease. But
Right.
getting concessions, and we're doing everything we can just to keep you in. We're bullish. We're hoping that, you know, even if we don't have a vaccine yet, the coronavirus will calm down a little bit. We'll find a way to deal with it. But really our biggest indicator of what's going to happen in the immediate market is going to be whether or not, you know, most importantly, New York City public schools go back to school, because they kind of drive the decision for everybody else.
Gotcha.
So
As far as bridging the
on
gap,
school though,
yeah.
Brandon.
yeah, so the other big thing too is corporations decide to move remote. How's that, you know, that's the whole issue about commercial space, but what that does to the people that like to live close to work and then maybe migrate and out of expensive rents because they don't have to necessarily commute into the office anymore. And I'm wondering if you're seeing any of that activity yet, because I know it's a big issue in San Fran and Texas right now.
Look, we're seeing that. I think there will be a fair amount of that. But to be honest, you know, there will be some jobs that'll go remote and that'll be it. But to be completely honest with everybody on the panel, I'm a small business owner. And to not have my team with me at the office and be able to communicate in normal fashion, you know, Zoom and all these other programs are great, but there's nothing like being in an office and screaming to the office next door about whatever, you know, keeping everybody in the loop and communication. And, you know, sometimes I call my employees during the day and I feel like I'm bothering them. You know, I try not to call when like Judge Judy's on or something like that, but I feel like I'm in a way bothering them by doing it. Whereas you don't have that feeling in the office, like you're intruding on their personal space. Whereas now we're in this kind of, you know, purgatory of like it's half personal, half business, and it's been complicated. So look, some people like, you know, Twitter and all these other large tech companies said, fine, we'll go remote. But for me as a Manhattan landlord through and through, I want to see people in the office. And I personally have no plan to reduce my office footprint. I'm just waiting for everybody to come back.
Right.
I just wanted to jump in on one thing, like talking about how you can help your landlords. Landlords don't like to hear the truth at times about the marketplace.
We don't.
I think you got to tell the landlords the truth about the market, number one. And number two, a lot of landlords don't like to reduce face rents for obvious reasons, evaluations. But if you start bringing in people on 2, 3, sometimes even more free months rent, what you're doing is buying your vacancy, because those people are not staying, number one. And number two, they're not qualified to live in that building from a financial perspective. So ultimately, if you can actually mark to market and give people the rent that you should be giving versus overly having concessions, it helps an owner have a more stable property. I understand why some can't do it. I understand why some won't do it. But those that could should consider it, because as a tenant, you actually want to pay the rent that you're supposed to be paying, not get a free month and all of a sudden jump up, because they're leaving. They go from one building to the next building to the next building, and I don't think it promotes stability inside of a building.
So Gary, assuming the tenant outlay is the same, is it easier to find tenants when the landlord pays the fee or no?
Of course. Everyone likes to save money. I mean, if you don't have to pay for something, you'd rather not pay for something. You know, but the reality is the market's so deep and the market is so complex that there are plenty of apartments where the tenant pays a fee. They're far better deals than if they don't pay a fee. Ultimately, you're paying a fee one way or the other. They might not like to hear that, but the reality is you need to go out and you need to see the market. You need to see all the different neighborhoods. You need to see the different price points of different types of apartments. And ultimately, the numbers will figure themselves out. You know, no fee certainly helps bring people in. But, you know, the reality is, let's just say before this market sort of went in this situation that it is now, you're probably about 25 to 30%, give or take, of the deals had concessions, which says 70% don't. So there's a lot of inventory out there that's marked properly for pricing, and that's why concessions aren't necessary.
That's great, Gary. Now you're awesome. All right, we're winding down here. I got 2 final questions. One is going to be for Gary, Sarah, and Eric. Okay, and I want to start with Sarah. I haven't heard from Sarah. What message are you sending out to your rental agents now to prepare for the reopening?
Well, we're encouraging them to message as much as they can to past clients on social media that they are doing deals, that you know, New York City is open for business, albeit remotely, that we're getting ready for a reopening. We're not sure when that opening is, that they have properties coming to market, you know, just, and talking about the neighborhoods that they work. A lot of our agents live in the neighborhoods that they work, which I think is really key for many rental agents, because they can really speak to what life is like in those neighborhoods. And especially right now, you know, the people that we are seeing moving into the city right now we've seen a bunch of doctors because their residencies are starting, you know, in June. And just people that were like, hey, I've always wanted to move to New York City and I never was able to because I wasn't able to get a deal. And so they're moving during this time. But if they're not going to be able to view the apartment in person, they really want to be able to speak to somebody that can tell them what it's going to be like to live there. So I would encourage agents, if they have inventory coming up, to really educate themselves on what is going on in that building and around that building, so they can really inform their clients about what it's like to live there. I mean, it's not that different than what it would be like if we were able to transact normally, but it is heightened because we aren't.
Right. Eric, same question. What preparatory message are you sending to your agents?
I've been doing a lot of the same things as Sarah from day one. Having agents reach out to clients that they haven't spoken to in 10 years, just continuing following up with people. One of our teams, he challenges his teammates to call at least 50 people a day, just to touch base with everybody. And for us, we believe, just like Sarah, our agents should live where they work. And we have one agent who's been giving neighborhood tours on his phone via FaceTime. So he's been calling up clients and literally just walking around with his phone, showing like the neighborhood via FaceTime, basically. So just a lot of different things like that. And they're just building up demand for when we open up. I had a Zoom meeting today with one of my offices, and I had like a couple agents saying they're so excited to get back into the office and just start showing again. And what do you call it? I think, again, I guess I'm an optimist, but I think we're going to have a great market. I opened up my company a few months before Lehman Brothers crashed. And one thing I learned back then is that a lot of people move. And there's a lot of movement, whether people are breaking leases. We did a lot of lease breaks in the last couple of months. So it's either people upgrading or downgrading or buying or whatever it is the case may be. There's a lot of movement during times like this. So I think we're going to be really busy, and I think the remainder of the summer is going to make up for the spring.
Yeah, and you know what? Related to the zero level we've been at, or the very depressed levels we've been at, this retrace, this rebound, it can't come soon enough. Gary, same last question for you. Any unique insights to add in terms of the message you're sending out there?
I mean, the first message is optimism. You got to be optimistic. I think that's the key message. I think you got to think positive, and you got to get out there and you got to work. You know, we've had a little mantra at the company, which is we want to rule the recovery. And what we've meant by that is we have been doing training now since March 13th when we shut down, 30 plus trainings a week. We've trained almost 16,000 people in our company on every possible tool you need, whether it's the brand new CRM that we rolled out, whether it's how to effectively use social media to your benefit, or a new database, or anything else to help add skills. Because I think if you talk to any really successful agent, when they're in their business, they're not working on their business. And they always tell you how busy they are and they can't get to A, B, C, and D, and they wish they had the time. So we have now, fortunately, been able to give them that time, and we've really set them up with foundational stuff that they should have done before that they haven't done, you know, just utilizing their CRMs, utilizing their personal networks, picking up the phone and calling people, just reaching out and saying, hi, how are you? What is going on? The basic human elements, not always fishing for business. And I think it's, if you look for ways to grow and you look for ways to build, things will happen. If you sit around and react to the market, it's going to be really tough to be successful.
Gotcha. That's great advice. All right, guys. So we're down to the last question here, and I'm going to start with Brandon. And name one thing that agents can change in their business to prepare today to make more money for investor clients in the future. How do I make more money? What could I change today? Brandon, let's start with you.
I think it's focusing on actual services and programs that you should integrate into your sale that will provide income stabilization and guarantees. I think that's going to be the big innovation that we're going to see come out of this, just like we saw in the UK, where you see actually rental income getting insured, not just leases, which is all the products that were just talked about. I think we're going to see true rental income as an innovation come into the market, and not just from us. And I'm really excited to see that become the new normal.
Great. Dylan, let's go to you.
One thing you can do, like I said, learning the technologies, learning how to play ball. And I think a lot of it, how do you make more money right now? Many people have kind of taken this as a holiday, but there's still a lot of people still working. So the best way to make more money is to continue pushing along. And as easy as it is to slack off right now, wake up, shower, get ready for the day, even if you're not going to the office, and have at it. We're seeing, success with people that are doing that. And we're seeing a lot of people who are, drinking most days.
Gotcha. That's great. Eric, one thing they could change.
Adapting, getting more. We have some agents who were kind of like, prior to this, we're not too receptive to changing technology. And I guess now they're more receptive to technology. Even myself, I was never a super tech type person. I had to get help about 6 weeks ago on how to use a Zoom. But now people are adapting to the change, and I think that's like the big thing.
Sarah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Gary kind of touched on this before. A lot of some of the multifamily owners that we deal with have very archaic systems. They want things done in a way, pen to paper, in the office, lease signing. That's just not what people want anymore. And it wasn't what they wanted even before this. So we have really been pushing DocuSign for, and I think before this, some of the landlords were like, well, it doesn't seem safe, where, even though it's pretty guaranteed, it says right on their site. And as there's more adoption by people that they know and trust and do business with, we're seeing more adoption across the board. And then I think the next big step is also getting them to figure out how to accept money in a digital way as well.
Digital lease payments.
Yeah, millennials, we deal with so many millennials. They do not have cash. Like they just don't, they do everything digitally. So, you don't want to take wires, fine. Let's figure out, can you set up a Venmo account or PayPal? What can we do to make this easier for people? So that's what we're pushing hard.
Gotcha. And Gary, let's end with you. One thing agents can change to prepare for the future, to make more money.
Just to realize we are in a hospitality business first and foremost. We might sell or rent real estate, but it's not about meeting client expectations. It's about exceeding them. And if that's your mantra and that's the way you focus, you're going to make a lot more money.
This is great. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Gary Malin of Corcoan, Sarah Saltzburg of Bohemia Realty, Eric Benaim of Modern Spaces, Brandon Keks of Pensio, Dylan Pichulik at XL Rip Property Management. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Stay safe, be well, and hopefully we can get you guys back on maybe in the future when we're recovering and see what's going on there. But thanks a lot, guys.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.